Having a great company culture is about so much more than a cheesy value statement plastered on the website and a wall in the lobby. In this portion of our conversation, Tia talks about the conditions that will create a culture that produces real results. We're focused on culture and
Mhm.
cultivating a culture that, yes, it is profit or revenue driven, and it is growth driven, but it is also all of these other wonderful, transparent and innovative and, development oriented. And so, can you talk about how you go about fostering a culture like that? Obviously, getting, no matter what level you're at, like making sure that you understand what the people, maybe in levels that are a few lower on the org chart,
Mhm.
what they're experiencing. Can you just talk about cultural development and, as part of that, what somebody who doesn't feel like they have the opportunity to influence culture, right? They aren't the CEO, they aren't the director. What role do they have in shaping or influencing culture as well?
I love that last question because everyone has a role. So I'll end with that. Gosh, culture is so important. I've experienced it through roles that I've been happy in, roles that I haven't been happy in, all through my career. And so, there's quotes out there, culture eats strategy for lunch. And I have a saying myself that is culture gets results, right? It's not the process. You need all those things, but at the end of the day, if you don't have a good culture, it doesn't get the result.
Yeah.
So how do I do it? Gosh, it's hard. That's one I will say it's hard. It's hard. It's something I do every day. It's exhausting on some days. Why is it exhausting? Because these are people. We are people. We have human needs. We bring
Yeah.
our full selves. And I actually love COVID for this, that our full selves are a little more allowed to walk into whatever place we are, right? So I might be coming in and you don't know. I might be in a horrible mood because my daughter did XYZ, or I got in a fight with my husband. You don't know what that person's walking into that room with. And then we're trying to, go to work and do these things. So it's messy. Humans
Yeah.
are messy. So how do we create culture? I will
We
anchor it.
fire them all and get IA, AI.
Right, AI bots. Here we go. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, yeah, that would be interesting. I don't know if that'd be easier, but hey, we'll play with that. Um, so the culture building is here. I would anchor it on three things. And you said a couple of the words, and that's a lot of where I focus, which is transparency. I'll talk about each of these: transparency, accountability, and clarity. So those that seems pretty easy, but you would be surprised, particularly as people get promoted. A lot of places, including the places I was at, didn't have like you were like, great, you're promoted, and then you're leading a team of 10 people. You've never led people before. It's very different. But if you can focus on, so let's start with transparency, and it'll build to the, transparency, accountability, and clarity. So transparency, I think a lot of times people try to sugarcoat and people see right through it. I'm sure every one of you can now think of a time when someone's trying to tell you a hard thing, or maybe they can't tell you the full picture. And instead of saying there are things that I can't talk about, but here's what I know, or here's what I can tell you, that's different than, so today, just kind of dancing around the topic at hand. So transparency is so critical because humans see right through when you're not being transparent. So just name it. I can't talk about this. Here's what I can talk about. Transparency looks like you may be feeling, right? I can understand what. So there's that transparency. And I think a lot of leaders also forget that people are not dumb. They can see the numbers, or they can read the tea leaves, so to speak. And so naming it and allowing that, to breathe a little bit is really important.
So
Uh,
how, I'm glad that
yeah.
because you already addressed it straightforward, because if you hadn't, that was going to be one of my questions is, obviously as you move up, there are things that you are privy to information that not everybody gets to know, right? And so that is difficult whenever you aren't able to share that. So I'm so thankful that you just went ahead and said, acknowledge that. Yes, I have additional information that I cannot share with you, but just know that that is what is, driving or feeding this right now. Um,
Here's another piece about transparency, and I'm going to relate it to clarity. So I'm going to skip over accountability for a minute. So transparency, clarity. clarity can be as easy as, this is your goal. That's kind of straightforward, right? This is your goal. Here's your 5 goals. Here's how it ladders to our overall mission and vision, or the overall performance of this company. And that's really, sometimes that's hard. Sometimes it's easy, right? But those are kind of the facts, black and white. Here's your goals. The other part of clarity is, and this is where I'll get to, like, as a CEO, right? Transparency. Sometimes I can't say everything. And sometimes I'm making a decision and there is no discussion there, that the, like, and you could have a leader that's like that. You could be making a decision and there's no discussion to be had. This isn't a consensus. This is the decision. I can tell you about these things that led to it. Here's what I heard, right? But giving the context. So the clarity is, for me, context and color. Clarity is, and clarity is, and this is great. My team and I were just talking about this. The question sometimes that needs to be asked as you're a leader or as you're providing clarity for people is, what do you need to know to get on board with this decision? That's different than, what feedback do you have about this decision? Because that, so if someone's going to give me feedback and I know I'm not going to do anything with that feedback, that feels not good, not transparent. Doesn't build trust, right? Culture leads to trust if you have that. So I really like that. My team, we're constantly working on this because it's a muscle, right? But what do you need to know about this decision to get you on board? Because that starts to draw out 2 things. For the leader who's made the decision, you may uncover something that you hadn't thought about that may impact the decision or impact, how we execute, whatever that might look like. And for the person on the other end, that feels like, okay, I can be heard and I can understand better so that I can be on board and we can move forward. So that clarity, I think, is needed and hard at times. I think here, and the last piece that I'll hit on is accountability. And this is directly related to feedback. One of the hardest things that I work on every single day, still and will till the day I die, and that, because it exists in your personal relationships and it exists at work. And that accountability equaling, and that feedback leads to accountability. So let me paint a scenario. If I'm in a leadership team or I'm in a peer group, right, and I'm not agreeing with my peer, or that peer, let me go even more personal, that peer is reacting defensively. We're making a hard decision, or I said, hey, we did this thing. And they're like, well, why didn't you include me? And my team needs to be involved. Or like, there's a lot of defensiveness. When you think about giving good feedback that then leads to accountability between each other, that could look like, hey, I noticed that you were frustrated about that. Can you tell me more about why you were frustrated? And you might, on the surface, they may look like they're being defensive, but underneath, it may be something else that you need to uncover. Another example, probably a little bit less human to human, or the kind of emotional, I guess is the word I was looking for. And one that's more maybe in the vein of like, we need to get this stuff done. Maybe we have a deadline. And I'm working with a peer and we both have an element of that. And that peer drops the ball for whatever reason. I can, that feedback that leads to accountability between us and for the team is, we've got to get this done. And it's not about helping them. Here's the other thing. It's not about helping or rescuing, but it's about telling them, I get really frustrated and I can't do my job when I don't get this from you. And I almost went to the, how can I help? Because you don't want to say that, but it's more of like, what's going on that we can,
preventing you from meeting your timeline.
Exactly. See, I'm practicing all the time too. So because in the higher I get, I find the more I have to do this, quite honestly. So my wish for any culture is to really have that accountability between people and have those seemingly difficult, sometimes they are, but I think the more we do it, that feedback really helps to elevate a team and get the hard things out on the table so that we make the right decision. Because if people hold back and we're not transparent and we're not clear and we don't hold each other accountable, then we're going to slow down and we're not going to get the things we need to get done.
Yeah. Can you speak just a little bit So Gen Z has developed quite a reputation of having some difficulty
Mm.
with some of these sorts of conversations. So do you have some tips for having these difficult conversations so that this transparency, this clarity, this accountability can be out there, but it's done in a productive and a healthy way as opposed to a confrontational or, a really highly contested way?
I'd say great. What came to my head was like, just do it. Because you're not gonna be perfect at it, and you're
Right.
going to make someone defensive. I still do it. Like it's just so you just got to do it, practice it. So easier said than done, but just do it. Like when you're feeling that feeling, when you're feeling that tension inside, and you're like, gosh, I'm so mad at that person, or that person did this thing. Um, Take a step back. Actually, Brene Brown is one of my favorites. When you go look at her, she has a whole section on difficult conversations. She calls it a rumble. She actually has a worksheet that has really great questions. I'm turning in my notebook here to look at them because they set up, it slows you down to ask a question so that it gives you the time to not be that like kind of attack and defensive and
Right.
you really made me mad because, and it helps you frame the conversation with questions so that one, you have time to think, and two, you really uncover what the underlying tension is, and you also, it gives you words to claim what you feel, because it's not about, it's what you're feeling.
Right.
I love, one of the things I use all the time is the story I'm making up in my head is, when you
I
did this
love that.
thing, I felt this way and I think this, and then they go, oh my gosh, not my
I
intent.
didn't
That's
mean that at
actually,
all, right?
yeah.
None of that is
So
true.
exactly. None of that. So it immediately you go, oh, thank goodness, because you're just claiming the story I'm making up. You're not saying when you did this, right? You're just saying, hey, the story I'm making up, and this is what I'm hearing.
Oh my goodness. I love that. That is like a huge light bulb for me. I hope that it will be for everybody else as well, because we make so many assumptions. We send a text or an email, we don't hear anything back immediately. We start making up the story. Oh, well, they didn't like it, or oh,
Yeah.
it's not a priority, or whatever. It can be a thousand things, from something small to really big, and that happens both personally and professionally. So I love that. Thank you.
Yeah. I use it a lot. I use it with my board. So if that helps anyone out there, like I use it with my board. The story I'm making up right now is, and I get
Yes.
great feedback and clarity. I get clarity of what they're actually talking about when I can frame it that way.
Yeah. I have a coworker who she doesn't say it that way, but she really gets in her head about the story that she is making up about things, and I have to like try to help her. It's like, I didn't get that out of that situation, or I wouldn't read that into it, right? So,
Yeah.
oh, what a powerful statement. I really like that. So, another follow up question: you mentioned feedback or articulating goals for somebody. What
Mm.
about somebody who is, you know, uh, in the position where their goals should be articulated for them from a superior or a boss or whatever, but they haven't been? How can they go about seeking that sort of clarity or feedback if they are not in the position of being the one to give it?
Yeah, great. So that's where accountability. So I'm going to go back to culture. That's accountability, right? So that's, you're not getting what you need to succeed. So that could, again, I go back to question asking. What you can ask questions back to that superior, like, what things can I focus on to be to be successful, or what parts, um, I'm trying to think of the way to frame it, but you really want to get clarity from them on what success looks like for you. So you could even ask, at the end of this year, if we were sitting here across from each other, what would success look like in your eyes for my role? What would I
Yeah.
deliver? What would that look like? Like there's some really good, powerful questions in there. If you're not getting it, then take it again. This is where accountability, and I love it when people do this. They take that, they go, thank you for the feedback. You have this great dialogue. You document it and you share it back. This is what I heard. So when we sit at the end of the year, this is where I'm working towards. And Are we aligned? That could be one conversation. Then you go back and you say, okay, by quarter, however you operate, weekly, I'm going to check in with you on my progress. Here's my 4 big things so that at the end of the year, you and I feel really good about success that we just talked about. And so taking it into your own hands instead of sitting there going, well, I didn't get this. I didn't get the goals. I didn't get the thing. You want to take it into your own hands and set up success for yourself. Because if someone's giving it to you, it's in your hands to create it, which sometimes is even more fun, quite honestly, than getting it handed to you. So
Agreed. And so, would you say that is, because I want to make sure that I give you plenty of runway, since this is such an important topic and is so passionate for you, is that the piece that you say the role everybody has in the organization, even if you aren't the leader responsible for setting the tone of culture, is what other pieces maybe does somebody, that's a little lower on the org chart, or they're in an entry level position, what are the other components of the role that they play in creating a great company culture?
I love that. I need accountability too. So I will tell you, sitting as a CEO, I do skip levels, like 1 level down, and then I often do CEO lunches, whatnot, where I can hear from people. And I always ask the same 4 questions. And so I'm going to start with me, and then I'll go back to, but I will wrap that in what is that individual, what do they own, and how can they help us and our culture as an organization, wherever you are. I asked the same 4 questions, which is what went well this quarter? What could have gone better? What can I do better? Me. And that's speaking truth to power, which is tricky sometimes. And then the last is, what questions do you have for me? So those are really open-ended, and you can tuck anything in there. I find themes when I talk across the organization. Now, here's what happens when people don't speak truth to power. I don't hear the right things. I don't hear them. And that isn't throwing people under the bus. That is, Tia, I don't understand why we're focusing on X thing. So the ownership, I'll go back to those, transparency, accountability, and clarity. You as an individual, if you're working let's go back to Frito-Lay, if you're delivering snacks to all of our retailers and you don't understand why we're asking you to sell in these 5 new products, then we will lose. All of us will lose. So having the courage to ask the question, can you tell me, I'm just not sure I understand why these products are important. What do we think they're going to do for the company or for me? Like sometimes you're just thinking like, I have to take away 5 SKUs of something else that I know is selling really well. And actually, maybe we need to hear that.
Right.
So I think you have knowledge that needs to be shared, and don't forget that, because I cannot know everything as a CEO, and I am only as good as what people tell me, and not without a filter, right? Without it. So that's hard. That's the hard part. And I know there's tons of leaders out there that are not, that may not allow that, but keep up the good fight and find. And what I mean by that is just you will not only build the muscle to ask the right questions and raise the right, let's go back to that. What information do you need to know to get on board with this? That's your responsibility from a culture. What else do I need to know or understand so that I'm on board with this? Because if you're not on board with this, we are not good.
Right.
So I don't know if that easier said than done. And I understand there's a lot of scary parts to that. Yeah, that's what I would say though. Just, keep asking.
We've all experienced, I know you and I both have experienced where we have not been in alignment with the culture, or we've not been in alignment with the leadership. What advice do you have, or how long should somebody give it before they're like, this just kind of isn't really working out?
Yeah. Gosh, great. My experience has been twofold. In those situations I have left, I don't have a magic number, but I think when you know that if you know that you've been asking the questions to seek understanding, get your concerns out, and that you're not feeling heard, or you're not aligned with that direction, then it's time to get out. And it could be just that it's not the right place for you. It could still be a solid strategy and a solid direction they're going, but you're just not, it's not your place. That's okay.
Yeah. I think that's
Um,
so the power of it's okay,
yeah,
right? If I can't get on board with this, I cannot wrap my head around why everybody else is on board with this,
yeah.
then, I don't need to spend every day fighting something that I'm not on board with. Yeah. That's
Yeah,
powerful to be able to recognize that.
I love how you summarize that too, because it's neither party in most instances are wrong. And that's something too I've had to work on my own self. Don't, a lot of times we take things very personally, like they're doing this to me and they don't get it. Well, maybe you don't get it, and that's okay too, right? And it's not that you're not smart and that you're not, it's just that you're not on board with that direction.
Yeah.
So I think um it's powerful when you can frame things that way, because it just not might not be the right place for you.
The story I'm telling myself is that I absolutely love Tia's advice for having difficult conversations and busting assumptions in the process. You're going to want to stay tuned for part 3 when Tia talks about asking Seth Godin to be a guest speaker and presents her case as to why nonprofit marketing shouldn't be approached any differently than other types of marketing.